This is the eLearn podcast. If you're passionate about the future of learning, you're in the right place. The expert guests on this show provide insights into the latest strategies, practices, and technologies for creating killer online learning outcomes. My name's Ladek, and I'm your host from OpenLMS. The eLearn podcast is sponsored by eLearn Magazine, your go-to resource for all things online learning. Click-by-click how-to articles, the latest in edtech, spotlight on successful outcomes and trends in the marketplace. Subscribe today and never miss a post at elearnmagazine.com. And OpenLMS, a company leveraging open source software to deliver effective, customized, and engaging learning experiences for schools, universities, companies, and governments around the world since 2005. Learn more at openlms.net. Hello, everyone. My name is Ladek, and my guest for today is Melissa Hortman. She is an Account Technology Strategist for research at Microsoft, who spent over 12 years as a higher education leader and innovator leading digital transformation and accelerating academic research in the United States. In this forward-thinking conversation, Melissa and I talk about what exactly is Education 4.0, and how is this changing the higher education landscape. We then go a little deeper to talk about what's the best way to implement the tools and the practices of Education 4.0. And, or, said another way, what needs to be evolved at an institution to make this a reality. We then move on to talk about what are the biggest challenges for this implementation of Education 4.0. What do educations need to do differently? What gaps need to be filled, and what needs to be overcome to make it a reality? And then finally, as we always do, we asked Melissa to tie it in a bow by giving her views on the most important challenges for empowering faculty to innovate and engender student resiliency to make higher education more effective now and in the future. And remember, we record this podcast live so that we can interact with you, our audience, in real time. So if you'd like to join in the fun every week on LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube, just come over to elearnmagazine.com and subscribe. Now, I give him Melissa. Hello, everyone. My name is Ladek. As you just heard, I am coming to you from a company called OpenLMS, and I have a fantastic guest for you today here on the eLearn podcast, Melissa Hortman, who I feel like I should call you Dr. Hortman. Should I call you Dr. Hortman? Is that a better term?
You can start out with that. I make my husband call me that, but
I had no idea we were going to go there. No, no. Melissa, I have been lucky enough to know you with a couple of different hats on at this stage now. But we're going to talk about Education 4.0. We're going to talk about the next matrix, I guess, that we maybe all are already living in. But before we get there, because I know I'm kind of salivating because I'm not sure exactly what Education 4.0 is. Tell us about who you are now, but give us the lead up. I don't want to be I'm a spoiler. I've known you with several hats. So where'd you come from? Where are you sitting now? And what's that cool brand that you work for now?
Yeah. So I'm very lucky to work at Microsoft. I've been here for a little over a year, and I help to be a strategic advisor for higher education in the U.S., across the entire U.S., which is really cool. So around digital transformation efforts, anywhere from classroom concepts to research to student success journeys, whatever it might be across an institution. I get to work with really fun people who have a fire underneath of them, and I just love that. And so kind of thinking back on my journey to getting here, I've had a long career in higher education, a little over 12 years. And when I did my doctorate in education to become Dr. Hortman, I did my research in disruptive technologies and disruptive innovations in higher education. And so I've always had this kind of, I've been drawn to gray literature and how do we change? How do we transform? How do we get buy-in for transformation? What does that actually mean? And so I've kind of created some waves in all my past jobs of, finding those areas for disruption and seeing what that really looks like in higher education, from a community college to liberal arts to most recently at an academic medical center. And so there's so much good, so much innovation happening in higher education, and it's so exciting. So
Mhm.
I thought, if I have the opportunity to work across the US with institutions who have this fire and this want, and just to transform in some sort of capacity to help serve their students better, I want to take it. I just want to be part of those conversations. So now I get to do that every day, which is absolutely amazing. I get to be amazing faculty, get to work alongside amazing leadership in higher education who just are really putting the student at the center of the experience. And it's a lot of fun.
That is, that introduction was just, I'm going to leave now. I can't even do that any better. But before we go to Education 4.0, then, because you have been talking with these, we just, full stop. It's March 7th. We're recording this right now. If you're listening to the podcast feed later, we just came back from our Connected conference. It was our first live conference. And this is the same. The buzz is in the room around what are we going to do about new technologies? How are we serving our students better? How are we going to update to be, higher ed, to be, prescient and exciting and, something that students want. Talk to me about that, or maybe that is the beginning of the 4.0 conversation. Is we still think if I go to any town in USA right now, whatever, and I say the words college or university, that is not the first thing people think is not innovative and agile and technology like that. It's still ivory tower. So start me there. How is that machinery working in your practice?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of times the news is about the regulatory systems around higher education and how it's been the same teaching in the same way for the past century, right? We're still sitting in these classrooms with the sage on the stage in some sort of areas. And it's interesting to kind of lead with that, right? To know that this is the history that we come from. But I do think now this buzz is getting brighter, right? It's becoming a little bit more interesting to talk about. It's becoming more of a priority to actually do something about, right? So I think we've always had conversations about transformation. The chief innovation officer, was a new thing about 5 to 7 years ago at a lot of institutions. Now we have the CXO role, really coming out. That's really looking at the student experience more. And we have this COVID generation that, I hate saying COVID, but it's a COVID generation that's really in school right now, in college. A majority of the students went through something that we will never understand. We will never understand what they went through. We will never understand what they're coming out of that experience with. And they're not that their demands are anything different. They're just, we need to have a little bit more sensitivity around these conversations of transformation. How do we actually serve this not new generation, but this new type of student that we all have at our institutions? It's not just the Ivy Leagues versus the community colleges on this. It's everybody. We're all in this together. All of our students went through something really tough. And so how do we truly put them at the center of this transformation and make school exciting for them, make it an experience again, make it, something worthwhile for them, for their careers, for their lives. It's bring back the value to higher education. So I know that was a long-winded answer, but I think it's just a really exciting time. It's kind of like the perfect storm. Everything's coming together right now, literally, like as we're speaking. All these things are coming together.
Hi there. I'm sorry to break into the show right now, but if you're enjoying this show, if you are challenged, if you're inspired, if you're learning something, if you think that you're going to be able to get something out of this to put into your practice, do me a quick favor. Pause right now and just hit subscribe on your podcast player right now. It doesn't matter which one, just hit subscribe, because that way it'll make sure that you never miss an episode in the future. Thanks. Now back to the show. Well, that was my question for you in the green room before we got started, was like, are we living 4.0 already? And we haven't admitted it to ourselves, but let's define it for people who are new or who haven't used that label yet. How do you define, in your role at Microsoft or the work that you're doing, what does Education 4.0 mean what are the pieces to it? What are the processes? Are there technology suites? Like lay the framework for me.
Yeah. So I think Education 4.0 is like Industry 4.0, which has been around for about a decade or so. So it's really kind of looking at advanced technologies integrated into education. So I won't just say technologies integrated into education, because we've had PowerPoint and certain things that have been around for a long time. But these are advanced technologies. So that's the differentiator there, is leveraging these advanced technologies to put the student at the center for, critical thinking opportunities, creativity that they can kind of expose them to, collaboration, adaptability, these life skills, or transferable skills that they can learn for life through leveraging advanced technologies like AI, VR and AR, Internet of Things, cloud computing, kind of the things that are out there that I do think we are kind of living in. Some institutions are just barreling ahead, right? So if we look at that innovation curve, there'll always be the people on the front end who are just like, let's do it. We're jumping into the deep end. I don't care how cold the water is. We're doing it. But then there's a lot of people in the middle who right now we're kind of having those conversations with. And I think we're kind of seeing that exposure to advanced technologies through a lot of things that are happening out there right now. And so how do they kind of bring those in to an institution to create life skill opportunities like personalized learning and all the things, project-based learning? It's all the buzzwords kind of all coming together to create a new opportunity for students, which I think, Education 4.0 is what we should be striving for, so that we can transform for the next generation, or for this COVID generation, putting them at the center.
So give me your opinion to start with about who or what needs to actually evolve and adapt, because I'm thinking about my 14-year-old son who's going to be going to college in 2 or 3 years. He don't need to adapt, right? Like he's already... He's ready. He's living it right now, right? With all of this advanced technologies, like that is even, I'm thinking Gen Z that's in college right now, or maybe it's Gen Alpha that's in college right now. I'm not sure. They're living it. This is what they're doing. And so is it the professors? Is it the structure? Is it the leadership? Is it the institution? What are the pieces that need to change, and are they willing to do it? And do you have any great examples of ones that may already have?
Yeah, it's a great point. I do think that this isn't just one single stakeholder that's ready to go and here we go into Education 4.0. I think that it's a lot of different collaborations between just higher education as a whole. So leadership there, faculty, students, everybody needs to be ready for it, for kind of some of these changes, because it's not the same as it was. Things are different, but it also has to be policymakers at all levels, state and local government, and as well as all the way up to the Department of Education. How do we, give accreditation out and all of the different things to make sure that our curriculum can be flexible and doesn't take 3 years to change and then we're already behind. I think there's a lot of pieces to that puzzle that are still being worked out. How can you be flexible in your curriculum, but then also forward thinking, and then just, I think, again, everybody has to be ready to evolve. And that's hard thing to get everybody on the same page at the same time in the same sort of way. When you might have computer science faculty who are just, that area is ripe for innovation. And then you might have philosophy faculty who are just maybe really tied to that traditional sort of look within a classroom, which is fine. But adapting across an entire system takes everybody to really buy into it. And, I think that there are those absolutely amazing higher education institutions out there that I've had the privilege to work with. I had an amazing conversation just yesterday with a faculty member, and just one of those like forward thinkers who is just, I see the next 3 years. I know what that is going to take to transform. And they said 3 years, right? And this is just, they were just looking at a piece of the puzzle. And transformation takes a bit of time. And so he talked a lot about encouraging his team. How do we keep people positive through change? So kind of that change management piece. But also, how do we get them to look at the end goal, like where we're going, and actually see that? So how do we make that end goal transparent? Because when we talk about Education 4.0 and all the things, what does that actually look like, right? Like, do we have people out there that are actually doing this in its fullest capacity and, just flowing with all the different great things happening at an institution? So I think there's those people out there, and I know that they have been on your podcast. They have been highlighted in different sort of capacities. I'm sure they were at your conference too. And so I think that there's the bright spots who are really helping to lead this way and kind of push that curve forward so that, everybody can be on the front end of that innovation. Did you hear any, conversations or really exciting things from people at the conference about, just the future of, or what this looks like, those, the futurist vision people?
Yeah, more than the futurist, I guess a really practical thing that really stood out for me is from a guy named Dale Johnson, who's at Arizona State University. He came and was speaking at one of our panels, and he revealed that for the first time ever, ASU is going to have more students online in online programs than in their campus. Their campus has 60,000 people, right? And so their online space is going to have something like 90,000. I'm don't quote me on those numbers. I'm not, but he said that, we've reached that moment where as an institution, they're delivering more online accreditations and degrees and certifications and that stuff than actually physically on their campus. That blew me away. Right. And, if there's any one person at the conference who I feel like is just super tuned in to what it takes to think about this 4.0 stuff, he would be one of those guys. Does that resonate with you?
Definitely. Yeah. I think that that's so exciting. So it's not just about the cool, shiny things, but it's about real transformation, again, putting students at the center. So I'm sure, and ASU's programs are absolutely amazing. I think some of the world's best online programs there that they're doing, and they're really innovative in the way that they're reaching and teaching students through that. And I also think about the digital divide a lot in Education 4.0, because bringing on some of these advanced technologies, not everybody has the ability to do that, availability to do that. And so what ASU is doing, I think, is kind of lessening that digital divide by bringing those opportunities to any and all students who want to have those opportunities. And again, putting the student at the center can be so incredibly powerful. And so I know that message has to resonate with a lot of people from the conference.
Yeah, 100%. So what are the, what are the challenges that you usually speak to specifically at higher ed institutions or with individuals, again, or leadership structures, those kinds of things? Is it trust issues? Is it, hey, I've been faculty here for 25 years. I don't really want to change. I'm good. Hey, we don't know what to do. Is it sort of just, I don't know what next step to take? Like, what are the bigger barriers or, those initial conversations that an institution needs to get through in order to start making progress towards this student-centered 4.0?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I really think a lot of the conversations that I'm having right now are really around staffing, just resources, upskilling current folks so that they have that ability, or of hiring folks that have that expertise. Not everybody is a prompt engineer, and everybody wants a prompt engineer these days. to be able to leverage and within their institution, or Internet of Things is insane on the back end. So you have to have that expertise on campus. And so to be able to transform, you have to have those resources, not just to build the infrastructure, but also to support the end user. And so I think that there's, while transformation sounds great, if you don't have the right pieces in place to do that from a personnel perspective, I always think about that because it's the human side of change. It's really what it is. It's all change management. The transformation is all around change management of making sure that stakeholders are heard, but also supported. So how can you do that? It's a lot of, I think it's really that side of it is, I don't think that people are scared necessarily of this, or there's fear around it that it's going to take their job from, what I understand, but it's more about the fear of the unknown, and maybe not truly understanding how we're getting there. How am I going to, update my course content while I'm teaching 4 classes, am a PI on 3 grants and mentoring 7 students for their dissertations, right? So it's not that people don't want to. I think every faculty member, every person that works in higher education is there for the right reason. They're there for the students. And if that means transformation in some sort of capacity, I do believe that everyone is going to do what's best for the students. But to be able to do that effectively, you have to have support for faculty. You have to have support through instructional design, through the technologies, through the infrastructure, through all of these things. And it really comes down to people. It's all humans.
Mm-hmm. So take me there. So you had mentioned digital divide issues and how this is one of the ways that we can reduce that digital divide, or at least it's one of the big considerations in this adaptation. Again, going back to our conference that we had last week, I was surprised, I guess is the right word, that we had a speaker like Dale from ASU, which is clearly one of the leading institutions in delivering education differently. But then we also had a couple of people who were there who, quite frankly, they like their institutions are literally just starting a distance learning program or just starting this. And so talk to me about that end of the spectrum. When you are contacted by, or you're starting to work with an organization or an institution that just hasn't started thinking about this, or hasn't, like, what are their first steps? Is it creating a committee around transformation, and like using the traditional methods to start talking about the future? Is it dropping a bomb in the middle of it and just sort of saying, hey, look, things are going to get broken and we're going to start breaking them as you would in Silicon Valley? Like what's the process there? What does it look like?
So I think that's a great question, because I do think that there's a lot of institutions, a lot of departments, a lot of individual faculty that are just starting these conversations. And that's fantastic. There's no wrong time to have these conversations as long as you're having them. That's how I feel. And so I don't know that there's a right first step, and I don't want to shoot myself in the foot by saying that, but I don't think that there's a first step that works for all. But I think it's just creating transparency of the journey and what the end goal is. So where are we going as an institution, which is different for every single one of them. It should not look like their peers. It should not look like another. It should look what's right for them and their faculty and their students and their culture on their campus and who they serve and how they're integrated with the community. Every journey to Education 4.0 should look different. It really should. There's no one size fits all for this. And I think that that's the most exciting thing, scary thing maybe, but exciting thing about this is everyone gets to kind of create their own journey. ASU's journey is not going to be what it looks like for, an institution, a small institution who's just starting out. And I think that that's a good thing. We all have our own cultures, or maybe digital divide challenge, or, what we really want our students to focus on as they graduate, if it's skilling, if it's whatever it might be. It all looks different. The components are the same, but the journey to the end goal looks different.
Okay, and then so what are those common outcomes, those common components then that that journey will take us to? I guess I'm really interested in that. Like, what do we have names for them? Is it a bucket called connectivity and a bucket called self-empowerment, self-empowered learning? I don't know. Like, what are those
Yeah.
buckets? What are those common outcomes that we should be looking for?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great question. From my perspective, what those common buckets should be is personalized learning. I think we've learned a lot around personalized learning in the past few years. What that takes to get to that point looks different for everybody, right? Personalized learning and how I define it might be different than how an HBCU or an MSI defines that, and it should be different. But I think that that's a bucket that's really important because students need to feel that this experience is for them. Learning in the classroom, outside of the classroom, it should be for them. They need that sort of, yeah, the personalized touch. Who doesn't like that? I mean, we're living in the Amazon world, right? So like, if it can tell me what to buy, like I just need that, right? So,
Sure. Mm-hmm.
I think project-based learning is one too. As we kind of evolve in our teaching, it's not that it's sage on the stage versus, all in, experiential, all this thing. It's just project-based learning where you're bringing in those real life transferable skills, again, back to kind of the beginning, transferable skills that students can learn and leverage in the classroom and then outside of the classroom. I think some of those advanced technologies and exposing students to them early and often is really smart. So with the era of ChatGPT, I'll bring it up. It's fine. I mean, who doesn't use it on a daily basis now? So I think that students need to know what a large language model is. Every student, not just RCS students, every student. And there's so many conversations going on right now about every job is a tech job. And so how are we preparing every student in every domain to understand these advanced technologies, understand, and then use them responsibly? Because if you put something out there, people are going to misuse it, right? That's what we always go towards. But if you educate them on what it is, what is a large language model? How can I train a large language model to actually maybe even elevate my own cognition? That's amazing to think about, in the marketing world for MBA students or for healthcare students and how they could leverage. There's just so many possibilities to advance our cognition by understanding across all domains advanced technologies. So we're living in it, but are we adapting to it? I think we're still getting there. And then I think, some other things like collaborative learning, again, those transferable skills. And then I think the last bucket that I'll talk about is lifelong learning. And I know that you all focus on that a lot through OpenLMS. And I think that there's so many possibilities to really kind of bring that into the classroom, this love for learning, this edge for curiosity. And how do we, across the spectrum, call everybody a learner? I'm still a learner. I'm not in school, but I'm still a learner, right? So we're all learning on a daily basis. So I think it's so interesting. Are you guys still having conversations around lifelong learning at OpenLMS? I remember those
Absolutely.
days.
I mean, that's it. It's again, going back to our conference, not to make us the topic here, but it's a critical aspect of everyone because at what point does education stop and work begin? Are we ever stopping learning when we're employable people? What is even the value of credentialing and these types of things that I guess that we had was it last week? No, 2 weeks ago. Her name is Kate, and I'm forgetting her last name. I apologize, but she oversees the Trusted Learner Network about how do we create an ecosystem where we can actually verify, track, model, share these credentials that we get over a lifelong learning, a life of learning. So it's, I think it's a conversation everyone's having,
Yeah.
and realizing. Mhm.
Realize that's a good point. Having, realizing, and hopefully putting some action behind. And that's what I mean.
Yeah.
That's how transformation happens, right? So I always think about a butterfly. I have got two very young kids, a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, and so we talk about metamorphosis and all the things a lot. And so I always think about that transformation that a caterpillar can make to a butterfly. And my son, he's 3. He's just, wow, that, that little thing that crawls on the ground can be something beautiful at the end. But, it's got to go through hard times and sit still sometimes and just be. There's so many things that we could take from nature and not change management for transformation, but there's action that has to happen. There's real change. It's not a caterpillar with wings. It's a butterfly, right? So it looks different. It's going to feel different. And that's a good thing. That's a great thing. I feel like I'm talking to my 3-year-old son by saying this.
Well, so let me challenge you on that, or ask you to stretch a little bit on that answer. Like, if I'm an institution now thinking about how I'm transforming, one of the hardest parts about change, hardest parts about somebody who's talking about transformation is like, when does it end? When can I stop changing and transforming? Like, what is there something, again, that you work with your clients or you work within your practice where you're like, look, this is what the picture looks like. This is how we know that we've arrived. Is that something that we know now, or we haven't defined that yet?
That's I love that question. And I don't know that I have an answer to that, because I don't know that there is, transformation never ends, especially in an adapting, evolving world like today. Technology will always be accelerating. Our students' needs might be changing. So getting there, I don't know. I think that we can paint a picture of where we're going. And once we're there, great. But it's like every institution has a new kind of institutional plan, mission every 5 years, right? They're always evolving. They're always reaching for more. And so I think you get to a point and then you reassess and say, okay, what's next? And that's okay. That's good, I think. And it's exhausting, but it's good. And I think we should always be reaching and searching for how we can continue, because like I said, technology will always be evolving. So those advanced technologies that we're bringing on campus will be new tomorrow. There's always an update.
So last question for you, and this is one I always ask everybody, is what's your vision and what are you looking at for the near-term future? The next 6 months, 12 months, maybe even 18 months of, we are now in a world of the generative, AI and, immersive experiences in learning and, lifelong learning, micro-credentialing, et cetera. What are you most excited about? What do you see coming down the pipe? What are you talking to your clients about being prepared for, or maybe that next milestone that is coming down?
Yeah. A lot. There's a lot there. I think one project that I'm currently working on that I think is going to be incredibly helpful, and you actually asked about it earlier in our conversation, is how do you take the first step towards something that's really complex? And so whether it's cloud compute, Internet of Things, advanced technologies, AI in the classroom, what's the first step? How do I get started? So I'm having conversations with practitioners across the US who have made that journey or are on the front end of the innovation curve, so that I can find out, what are some of those best practices on just getting started? How do I get started? That's the scariest part, right? Once you make one step, you make two, you make leaps, you make jumps. And so that's a big piece, I think, of this puzzle. And I think as I look forward, it's just the opportunities of these advanced technologies, once we take those first steps, to solve some of the biggest pain points that I know I've been having conversations about my entire career. How do we truly help students matriculate, offload that administrative work so that we can connect with them, so that we can, make our advising appointments more informative, all the pieces, smart enrollment structures, everything. So I think advanced technologies in the next 6 months, not even, I don't even know what's going to happen in the next 12 months, but in the next 6 months is really going to help us understand how we can solve, I think, some of our biggest pain points in higher education, which is so exciting to me. And just, I think, can make a student's experience, a faculty's experience, an administrator's experience so much brighter on campus. That's exciting, isn't it? I just get excited about that stuff.
Fantastic. So, Dr. Melissa Hortman, I continue to call you doctor. I love it. I just closed your exact title at Microsoft. What is your exact title?
I'm a senior industry executive.
Okay, excellent. And Microsoft, if people want to get a hold of you, if people want to find out more about Education 4.0, what's the best way to do that?
Connect with me on LinkedIn. I love, love, love to have conversations with folks. I want to meet more academics, people in education across the spectrum, whether you're on the front end of innovation or just getting started having these conversations. I want to have those conversations with you. That is my job, which is amazing. And I think one of the coolest things is just to hear from peers and share some experiences. Again, I get to talk to people across the US. So please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with you. I'd love to learn more about what you're doing and maybe some of those pain points that you have.
Fantastic. Education 4.0, Dr. Melissa Hortman, thank you so much for your time today. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you again for listening to the eLearn podcast here from OpenLMS. I just wanted to ask one more time, if you enjoyed this show, if you learned something, if you were inspired, if you were challenged, if you feel like, this is something you can take into your practice, please do me a favor. And right now on your podcast player, hit subscribe. That way you're never going to miss a future episode. Also, come over to elearnmagazine.com and subscribe there as well, because we have tons of great information about how to create killer online learning outcomes. Thanks.